really enjoyed doing the January ranking, and I'm very happy with how it turned out. As a result, I've decided that I will definitely do film rankings for every month this year. If you want to know why I'm doing a monthly ranking instead of a yearly one, then check out the January video. Either way, let's talk about February. February is a month where I have a week off of school during the February half term. Usually time of school means I'll watch a couple extra movies compared to usual, and this fact absolutely applies to February. Even more so than all the others because I never get to do anything interesting in the February half term. Ironically enough, the most memorable part of the February half term was when I went to the cinema to watch a film. Either way, that means that there is plenty of substance in this list as I watched quite a lot. As for what is on the list, I saw a grand total of 16 films, and we've got a couple of familiar faces from January, such as Studio Ghibli and a few sequels to films I saw in January. However, there is still a lot of variety within this batch as well. The films which I saw in February were The Gold Rush, Metropolis, The Graduate, The Vanishing, Only Yesterday, Porco Rosso, Goldeneye, Princess Mononoke, Titanic, Mulan, Kung Fu Panda 2, All Is Lost, the Postman Pat movie, Captain Fantastic, Jojo Rabbit, and Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. Let's start ranking them, and be sure to check out my letterbox reviews for more in-depth thoughts.
Postman Pat, Postman Pat, Postman Pat, and his black and white twat.
I mean, what else was I going to put at the bottom of the list? The Postman Pat movie is not very good, to put it simply. It completely misses the point of the original show by making the film about a robot apocalypse instead of nice drives in the countryside. Alongside that, Pat is now a singer on a show run by Simon Cowbell.
I'm Simon Cowbell, and we'll be back after this break.
I hate everything. Furthermore, the plot seems hinged on Pat being a flawed protagonist, yet he never does anything wrong intentionally, so its message falls flat. It is just a really stupid and dumb movie. With that being said, I love this movie. It's so much fun to watch throughout because of how insane it is. However, I do still think that there's some merit here. If you stop and squint, you realise that the main plot is actually a deep political commentary on capitalism and globalization. Although if you want to see a better movie about globalization, wait until we get near the top of the list. Alongside that though, the British charm is still intact and the voice actors are actually really entertaining, especially David Tennant. Yes, he's in this movie for some reason. The only exception when it comes to the good voice acting is when Pat is singing, as it's so obviously changed actors to the point that it's comical. Overall, I don't think this movie is absolutely awful, and I definitely have a ton of fun with it, but it's not exactly a good movie either.
And I'm sorry. I am very, very sorry.
Let's just get this over with. I don't like Metropolis. I'm sorry, okay, I really tried to like it, but I just found it way too long, really slow, and just boring. One reason I found it boring was the absurdly slow pace, but the other was most likely because it was silent. I have no problem with silent movies, but I don't think I can handle one which is over 2 hours long like this film. Alongside that, it's a very narrative-driven film which is just hard to follow without sound in my opinion. However, I don't just find the film boring. I also find the plot really strange and hard to follow. It felt like the main plot jumped between characters like crazy and it really threw me off throughout. It also meant that none of the plots felt very fleshed out to me, although the robot one was pretty cool. I think what also doesn't help is that despite loving sci-fi, I'm not big on the more political sci-fi stories like this, so that definitely didn't help. However, I did still give this a relatively generous score from a technical level. For the 1920s, this film is very impressive with brilliant sets and an insane number of extras. I also already mentioned it, but the robot stuff was really cool. Overall, I can see why people like this film, but it's just not for me. It's basically just a sequel to my opinion of 2001: A Space Odyssey, to be honest.
The need for bigger vessels led to the invention of the Titan 1C, the world's first single-use submarine.
And we go from one controversial opinion to another. I really don't care much for Titanic and find it quite overrated. Whilst I am able to get more enjoyment out of this film than Metropolis, I'd argue that this film makes me the most annoyed when watching compared to everything else on this list. For starters, I really don't like the main romance, which is why I'm not big on the film as a whole. It's boring, it's played out, it's cliche, and I just don't care. As a result, the first half of the film is an absolute snore fest, with some good moments here and there admittedly. However, when the ship does end up sinking, I end up caring about every character besides Jack and Rose, because I just don't care about their romance. What probably doesn't help is the fact that Jack and Rose are fictional characters, so I end up caring less about them when compared to the real life victims. Speaking of fictional parts to a real tragedy, this film also annoys me because of how disrespectful it is at points. I don't have time to go into it here, but look up the story of William Murdoch and then see how he was portrayed in the film and just try to tell me that it's not disrespectful. Nevertheless, I give this film a mid-score instead of a bad score for a reason. I do think that the film picks up in the second half with solid action and brilliant visuals. The sets are brilliant and the costumes are amazing. Just like Metropolis, this film gets a higher rating than I would normally give it purely from a technical level. But overall, I'm really not too big on this film and it absolutely did not deserve the insane box office revenue it got.
I'm just a poor boy, nobody loves me.
The Gold Rush is another hilarious silent comedy, and it's my response to those who left a comment after my Metropolis segment saying that I just didn't like silent movies. With that said, this was definitely one of the weakest silent comedies I've seen, but it wasn't bad at all. Please note that the jump up in quality between Titanic and this is immense, so don't think that I think this film is mid, because it's not. It's great. The comedy was hysterical throughout, from the bread roll scene to the house on the cliff at the end. Chaplin is just as amazing as usual, and I love his dynamic with Big Jim, and the film is just generally really well directed throughout. However, the reason I say it was one of the weakest silent comedies I've seen is because the dramatic stuff didn't really work for me. The main reason why is simply because I really don't like Georgia, who was Chaplin's love interest, because she was mean and horrible and didn't feel like she fully redeemed herself by the end. I just wasn't really that happy when Chaplin and her got together in the end, because Chaplin's tramp character deserved way better than her. Still a really fun movie though despite that.
I am Adolf Hitler, command of the Third Reich. Little known fact, also 2 points of my...
Jojo Rabbit is a bit of a weird film for this list, as whilst I still think it's a fantastic movie, it kinda gets weaker the more I think about it. Don't get me wrong, there is some fantastic stuff here. The direction and cinematography is incredible, Taika Waititi as the imaginary Hitler is absolutely hysterical, and the idea of showing Nazi Germany through the eyes of an indoctrinated child is genius. And that shot, which those who have seen the movie will know what I'm talking about, is absolutely phenomenal. However, I've got some problems with it. Whilst the Hitler stuff is funny because it's all in Jojo's imagination, I think that some of the other comedic moments, like with Klenzeldorf, didn't work for me. I also found the pacing really inconsistent as it kept slowing down and speeding up, and it didn't feel very natural here. Still, despite my flaws with it, I definitely recommend checking it out because it is still really good. The Great Dictator is a much better Nazi comedy though.
All is lost here.
All Is Lost is a criminally underrated film which I wish more people would check out. I think what immediately makes this movie work for me is because I really love survival stories. I find them just so fascinating. Whilst this film is a fictional story, it definitely takes inspiration from true events, which I think makes the film super engaging as a result. The atmosphere for this film is fantastic and really emphasizes the complete emptiness of the ocean and the isolation of our main character. The storm scenes are brutal outside of some bad CGI here and there, and I am amazed at how captivating this film is despite there being hardly any dialogue at all. I will admit that I think the novelty of this film kinda wears off a bit on a rewatch as you know exactly what's going to happen. However, when I first saw it in 2020, I was completely hooked because I had no idea whether the protagonist would survive or not. I find it miraculous how I care so much about a character who doesn't even have a name. Yeah, this film is fantastic and please check it out.
But I'd rather be a pig than a fascist.
Porco Rosso is just pure, clean fun throughout and it doesn't need to be anything more than that. It's about a pig who's also an ace fighter pilot. What more do you want? Overall, I really love the feel of this film. It felt very reminiscent of classical Hollywood movies like Casablanca or The Dam Busters, and generally feels really unique. Marco is an interesting protagonist because he is reflective of the 1920s well, due to being this beloved action hero, who's also not exactly the nicest guy around due to being a bit of a womanizer. Theo is a brilliant character to pair with Marco as they bounce off each other really well, the action is superb and the animation is gorgeous throughout, although that's expected for Ghibli. However, despite being a fun movie, there's definitely stuff you could read into with this film, like with the criticisms of war for example, but I think that stuff is better to just watch yourself than for me to explain. But overall, this is a lesser talked about Ghibli film, but I still thoroughly enjoyed it and would highly recommend it.
Captain Fantastic.
I'm not going to dwell much on Captain Fantastic, as I already went in depth on this film in my video on 5 underrated movies, but either way I think this is a very engaging, thought-provoking but still a fun watch with great performances from our leads. I rewatched it in school this month and admittedly I didn't enjoy it as much on a rewatch as I knew exactly what was going to happen this time, but I do still think it's a fantastic film and I recommend it.
Who's this? Looks like Simon and Garfunkel.
I will never be able to listen to another Simon and Garfunkel song in the same way again. Either way, The Graduate is absolutely fantastic. It really shouldn't work, as the film should feel quite creepy and weird, yet it doesn't really feel that way because it is more of a criticism of the young, rebellious lifestyle, as shown in the ending of the film. It's not exactly a desirable lifestyle as this film shows. Although in spite of that, the film is still surprisingly enjoyable. It has a lot of funny moments to it and is a thoroughly engaging watch. Couple that with some incredible direction and cinematography and you've got a real classic here. Seriously, the cinematography here is fantastic, and the fact that it lost the best cinematography Oscar to Bonnie and Clyde is honestly embarrassing.
We must be swept out the court.
with all the force of a great typhoon.
For some reason, I never really got around to watching Mulan properly. But I'm glad that I finally did, as it has become one of my new favourite Disney movies. It is an absolutely awesome movie with fantastic action, fun characters, and the best Disney song ever made in my opinion with Make a Man Out of You. I can listen to it 100 times and never get tired of it. Alongside that though, this film also has one of the best feminist messages in a Disney film. Despite having to hide her gender due to customs at the time, Mulan is successful as a result of her cleverness and ingenuity, but also thanks to her perseverance and training. I think telling young girls that they can be just as good as men if they put in the same amount of effort is a great message, and it's way better than telling them that they can only be as good if they are born with some kind of special ability. But what kind of movie would do that? Overall, this film is absolutely fantastic. However, it is definitely let down by a weak villain. Shan Yu is intimidating enough, I guess, but he isn't in the movie long enough to be entertaining, he has no deeper layers to him, and he also has no personal relationship with Mulan, so feels quite distant. In spite of that though, Mulan is still a brilliant film and one of my favourites from the Disney Renaissance.
Goldeneye, I found his weakness. Goldeneye, he'll do what I please.
Goldeneye is absolutely one of the best Bond films. I do have some flaws with it, most notably with the pacing in the first half and the odd music used throughout, but outside of that, this film is amazing. The action is superb, with the stunts being especially fantastic. The opening bungee jump and the tank scene are particular examples of this. The characters are also really great here. Brosnan is superb as Bond like usual, but Natalia is one of my favourite Bond girls because of how capable and fun she is, and Alec is one of my favourite Bond villains because of his background and relationship to Bond. Another thing I really like about this film is how much it taps into the post-Cold War background, especially through the bigger emphasis on technology due to being more modern. Overall, this is an absolute must-watch in terms of Bond films because it is absolutely fantastic. I really should get around to playing the game, shouldn't I? 2. I'm gonna be honest. I preferred Kung Fu Panda 2 to the original on a rewatch. Whilst it isn't as funny as the first film, I just found it to be a much more interesting film overall. The main reason for why I love this film is because it had the courage to tell a much darker and more mature story. Seriously, this story is really messed up when you think about it. This is a movie about panda genocide. However, I feel like darker stories often work well as a middle chapter, think Empire Strikes Back, and this is no exception. It develops Poe a lot more than how he was in the first film and makes us care about him even more. This culminates in the scene where he finds inner peace, which is quite possibly one of the most beautiful and emotional scenes in any film. Look, I love the I Need a Hero scene from Shrek 2 as much as the next guy, but I personally think that this scene is even better. But that's not all. Lord Shen, whilst not as good as Tai Lung, is still a fantastic villain and quite possibly the most evil DreamWorks villain. Lord Shen is intimidating as hell, and is also probably deep-rooted trauma for me, which is why I have a phobia of peacocks. Alongside all of that though, the animation and music is just as good as the first film, and the action is also absolutely superb. In terms of action, nothing in this movie quite tops the highs of the first film. However, there's a lot more action here, and it is still fantastic. If you even somewhat enjoy the first Kung Fu Panda movie, then you absolutely need to check this out. After watching nothing but Miyazaki in my Ghibli viewings, I thought it was about time to check out someone else, so I decided to watch Only Yesterday to give Takahata some appreciation. Now, I have absolutely no idea how to approach this segment, as Only Yesterday is such a different film to anything else I have ever seen before. Yet, I honestly really vibed with it. It has such a unique presentation of flashing back and forth between Taiko's past and present, which really shouldn't work, yet it just does. I think the reason it does work is because the reason for each flashback's existence is meaningful and came as a result of Taiko naturally thinking about a particular event. For example, seeing a pineapple reminded her of the pineapple story. What Only Yesterday really excels at is its realism. There's no fantastical elements like most Ghibli films, it is purely a slice of life story told through animation, yet it works really well. Not only is it easy to relate to and enjoy the characters as a result of their realistic portrayals, but the fact that the film is animated helps with the presentation of the whole thing, as it is able to give the past this sort of hazy and dreamlike quality to it, which is really hard to explain and instead easier to just watch yourself, and works so well from a visual point of view. I will admit that this film is definitely not for everyone because of how different it is from the mainstream, but I'd say that if you can enjoy something like the pineapple scene, then you will enjoy the whole movie. Either way, I absolutely adored it and I definitely recommend at least giving it a go. It also got special bonus points for calling out how dumb fractions are.
What a twist!
I'm going to keep my ramblings about The Vanishing brief, as I recently uploaded a whole video on this film. Granted, that video was only focused on one element of the film, that being the villain, so I'll quickly go over everything else that I love about this film. For starters, the Tarantino-esque non-linear structure works really well here, and was not only unique from a storytelling perspective, but also kept the audience engaged during the mystery as layers were peeled back. The themes in this movie about closure and obsession were also really well done for the way we see it consume Rex, right up until the ending, which I refuse to spoil. And whilst this film is a really slow burn, it is one of the scariest films I've seen. Due to its slow burn nature though, it won't be for everyone, but I think the slow pace works really well for this more realistic story. It doesn't have jump scares or extreme violence, yet it's absolutely terrifying. Definitely check out this foreign language masterpiece if you're a fan of thriller films.
On all levels except physical, I am a wolf.
Speaking of foreign language masterpieces, Princess Mononoke is one of them. Where to even begin with this film? Well, for starters, the animation is absolutely stellar here. Obviously most Ghibli films have amazing animation, but this film just goes above and beyond with many striking visuals and gorgeous landscapes which make the whole thing just a treat for the eyes. Alongside the animation, the music in this film is incredible. It may just be my favourite soundtrack for any animated film that I've seen, and I'm not even kidding. However, outside the technical aspect of this film, Princess Mononoke is just a fantastic and gripping story from start to end. It is all about our relationship with nature and the way humans are destroying it, and the film essentially asks the question of, what if nature fought back? This is shown via some incredibly raw and visceral images of the humans fighting with the forest, and the action in this film is so epic. The film as a whole just has an epic feel to it. However, despite being a clear environmental message, it doesn't feel preachy and it is delivered in a very unique way to not be one-sided. For example, Lady Eboshi is the antagonist, however she is more than some one-note industrialist. While she is destroying the forest, she's doing it for an understandable cause as she wants to protect and provide for the people of Irontown. She's a very caring and respected leader and clearly has good qualities to her. She is just misguided. Alongside Lady Eboshi, I'd argue that all of the characters in this film are fantastic. Many of the side characters can be really fun and help to give this pretty dark story some natural levity. However, our main duo of Ashitaka and San are absolutely fantastic. San is a really interesting character due to being the literal personification of nature and the forest, despite being a human, and comparing her actions to Lady Eboshi's is really interesting. But Ashitaka is just such a likeable protagonist because he is someone you can root for. He is trying to keep the peace whilst the world falls apart around him. In stories like this, you don't need a deep protagonist, as instead, the audience can put themselves in the shoes of Ashitaka to get a neutral perspective of the whole conflict, whilst everyone else has the deep parts to them. It's just a fantastic way to present the story. I also want to mention that alongside being an epic story, this film absolutely nails the quiet moments, although that's expected with Miyazaki. The slower scenes where we just see the beauty of the forest are absolutely incredible, and if Miyazaki made this film with the intention of showing the beauty of nature, he absolutely succeeded. So overall, Princess Mononoke is a must-watch for everyone, not just animation fans. I will say that it definitely isn't for kids as there is a lot of violence including an on-screen decapitation, although I definitely think the violence helped to aid the more serious tone of this story. But outside of that, everyone should watch it thanks to the brilliant characters, fantastic messages, gorgeous animation, and breathtaking music. This is absolutely a masterpiece, and I don't see how anything could possibly top it. Oh yeah, that film.
Who is your favorite fearless hero? Who is your favorite fearless hero?
Okay, none of you will be ready to hear this, but I'm just gonna say it. At the moment, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish is my favourite animated movie.
What? 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 What?
Yes, I am being dead serious. To demonstrate how much I love this movie, despite still being only available in cinemas in the UK, I actually went to go and see the movie twice in the same week. I paid money to watch it again because I couldn't wait until it came out on streaming. That really says a lot. Chances are, I probably won't need to explain why this movie is amazing, as most people have probably seen it and sung its praises, or they've heard other people rave about it. However, everything people have been complimenting is true, from the gorgeous animation, fun characters, and the greatest villain in any animated movie, and yes, I do mean that. However, the real reason I love this movie this much is because of how much it impacted me personally. These personal reasons for loving this film though, are something I have literally no time to talk about in this video. As a result of this, I'll instead be doing a full video talking about this movie at some point in the future. This way I will be able to go into detail on why every part of this movie works astoundingly and why it impacted me so much. There is absolutely no guarantee that this video will be coming anytime soon though, as it is a project which I want to get right, but rest assured it will be coming one day in the future. Until then, just know this movie is a masterpiece and one of my new favourite films of all time. And those were my February viewings. In general, this was definitely quite a mixed month for me. I had plenty of fantastic films, including one which has made its way to my top 5 of all time, but there are also plenty of films which I just didn't care much for. Either way, let me know what you think of this list and whether you agree or disagree, although I imagine most would probably disagree with me seeing as I dissed both Titanic and Metropolis and they're both pretty popular films. Just like last time, be sure to let me know of any recommendations for films I should check out based on what I liked from this list, and also be sure to let me know what you saw in February. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care and I hope to see you again on this channel very soon. Goodbye everyone.